Alright, so here's a quick little tutorial on how to make a kind of a bobble photo. You're going to need a couple different materials. I've got a photo that I want to use, and then I've also cropped and made it a face or some sort that's a little bit bigger, because bobbleheads are usually a little bigger. I'm going to use some glue. You can use hot glue if you're a little less patient. Wire cutters. Need something round to wrap this around. I'm using a metal rod out of a CD player I took apart earlier. Here's a piece of masking tape, maybe some scissors, some type of utility knife or a box cutter. I have some wire. This is magnet wire. You're going to want something with a smaller gauge, and it works really, really nicely. Also use some like handy wire. You want something that vibrates pretty well and just kind of bounces on there. You need about a foot of this. Also some stiff paper. I have some mat board right here that was just some extra sitting around. But to get started, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my photos, and that way later on I can go ahead and work on my wire while I'm doing that. So we're going to start by removing the photos we want to use. And for the head of the bobblehead, I'm going to cut around the face. You don't need the whole thing. You could do this with scissors if you wanted as well. So I've got those two. We're going to get something that looks kind of like this. So kind of look and see what you're thinking there. I found that it helps a little bit if you cut the top off, so I'm going to go right through my forehead there and just get this face on here. If you want to trim anything, now is probably the time. Next we're going to need kind of two pieces on here for the mat board. I'm going to need some type of stand and then also some kind of base. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut off kind of, yeah, I'll leave a little extra there. So my mat board cut off. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this and just score it so I know that it'll fold. Start of a little stand working here. I'm going to go ahead and pop this up too over on the side. There are lots of ways that you could reinforce this if you wanted to. I think I'm going to take this and maybe trim it down before I get too far into this. I'm looking at the base here where it kind of lines up. And I'm going to go ahead and just cut that mat board off in the same spot. Be careful when you're working with the knife. Don't cut your fingers. And before I glue that on, I'll go ahead and reinforce my base using a piece of that masking tape that I had. We're going to hopefully do this for a Mother's Day present here this weekend. So now I've got kind of a base panel that's going to work. Go ahead and I'm going to tape this on here. It says don't forget your sketches for engineering class. I'm doing this pretty quick. You could certainly make them a lot nicer using maybe rubber cement, oak tag, or I don't know, whatever you want. If you got really fancy, I'm sure you could make a printout that would keep everything nice and organized. Go ahead and glue on my background. I've got that. And now I need to deal with the head. So while that's drying, I'll go ahead and deal with the head. Hey, that'll fit on there nicely. Cut these out with a scroll saw on the mat board as well, but you don't have to do that. A pair of scissors will probably do the job nicely. You could use whatever material you really wanted to. Something a little bit heavier helps a little bit. I'm going to use some scissors just to trim that around. It looks a little funnier. I guess I didn't have to cut my face out earlier. I could have done it now. But. So getting those now, I've got the big crazy looking head with it's kind of going to bobble around there like this. So while those are drying, I'm going to go ahead and take a length of wire. I'm going to use about a foot's worth of wire is working. This was a 3x5 photo just to give you kind of a size comparison. About a foot's worth of wire seemed to work. Clip that off. And I need to make some kind of spring coil. In this case, I'm just going to bend this over, maybe take about 3/4 of an inch there. And I'm going to wrap it relatively tightly. The more coils you have, the longer that motion will maintain itself. So, depending on kind of what you want, there's a little adjustment. You could experiment with some smaller stuff if you wanted to. And I've got a nice little spring there. And if I kind of flick that, kind of wiggle around there, which works pretty nicely. And I need to have that attached onto the back of my funny looking face. So I'm just going to use a piece of masking tape right now. If you wanted to get kind of more formal and more careful, I'm sure you could do this nicer, but this is kind of a first run for me here. Bend that wire just a little bit, and so now if I've got it right here, it kind of wiggles back and forth. Something that I have noticed that I've tried to balance things out in front, and they don't seem to vibrate as long if the spring is parallel to the ground. So it does work better if that's up and down. And then on the back here, I'm going to go ahead and get this ready, and you can kind of see how those are going over. This makes kind of an arc shape over down. So I do just enough clearance that it can, it's still mostly vertical is what I really want that spring to be. So it's just try to keep that spring perpendicular to the ground. And I'm going to look and see kind of where this should land on here. And if I get that right, I think that looks pretty good there. And you can make all kinds of cards with this if you wanted. You take some bending and a little bit of playing to make sure that things aren't touching the touching each other. But once you get them kind of bent and adjusted, sorry about that. Hopefully, get a nice little bobble going here. So we'll see if I. And I'm going to go ahead and move the camera here so you can see what's going on. So in an ideal world, you get something that looks kind of like this. So don't forget your sketches. You can jiggle the face around and be a little angry person. So, you know, make a Mother's Day gift or something else, or if you want to try that out. And cost is pretty cheap. If you're looking from the side here, I've just got a little piece of wire spring on the back, and you know, whatever you want, you can have a good time. So good luck and thanks for watching.